It's not the best situation, but at least it just is a placeholder. So then I just have it focused on that eventually. There's like quite a lag.
That was like.
I know. So then that just stays. You can see how many people are logged on. 0 right now.
Okay, click to unmute. Okay, now you're.
So you can see. This is just so you can see what it looks like for them. Yeah. Okay. So this is how I monitor it. I'll give you the YouTube information, and then what you do is you create a live video, so you go live. And if this doesn't work for you on the day of, don't worry about it. I can always embed the. Okay, so we've gone live. So this is the YouTube live. So that means that this is streaming on Vimeo. So this widget is embedded the Vimeo stream. And then we also have a video on YouTube. This is all just telling you how it works on our end, but you just have to start the live stream. And then after that, then it creates these files for me, so I don't have to download it from Vimeo, edit it, and upload it. So having the widget on our website that creates a duplicate file for you too is really handy. So all you have to do is start the live stream.
Okay, when you go to the web page, our site, and then.
So I just monitor it to make sure that the live stream is healthy and the connection is strong on our page. And then once I see that the connection is strong on our homepage, I go to YouTube and I start.
How you start the live stream?
Sure. So you go to YouTube and I'll give you the login information. And you go to this camera up here. See that? And you hit play and then click live.
And that's gonna be.
That's already this. So usually, like if you're starting a new live, it would ask you for like the live stream key. And that's already been saved. So I paste it. So that's ready. So all you have to do is.
That's two pages.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just home, make sure the stream is healthy, go to YouTube Live, and all you have to do to start the system is click power on air. And that's it. And then just to show you how to use the camera.
I was going to ask you, how does the sound get into the video?
Oh, yeah. So it's run through the board. So the mics are run through the board, and the board inputs to the camera stream. So
Nothing to be done, just like the.
yeah. So this is super self-explanatory. You don't have to do anything with the settings. All you have to do is, this is the zoom. So if someone's at the podium, zoom in. Someone's at the zoom out. If they're doing the covenant, go up. Use your best judgment, etc.
Do you like check the sound with somebody else? Like, hey, what one, can one?
I would like to, but it's already here, so I just do it by myself.
Okay.
I mean, like, that's the best practice, honestly. But because you know,
Takes two.
it takes two people.
We said this for
Lav 1, Lav 1. So, Lav 1 is working. Full battery, that's true. Lav 2. Lav 2. Lav 2.
handheld 1, handheld 1, handheld 1,
I need to tune the mic.
handheld 2, handheld 2,
So I'm going to take these down. And are you going down?
Yes, my kids, both of them are here.
Okay.
But next week, when we start the families here, I'll have them here.
Yeah. Super simple.
Yeah, I got them.
Good morning. I'm Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at All Souls, and so glad to welcome you all here this morning. It's a different morning than most, as you can see by these yet to be revealed items here. I'm excited about that for you. One of the things I'm thinking about this morning with you in the service is the notion of being called. And in a religious tradition that really isn't so much having to do with a cell phone or it has more to do with sometimes an inner voice, sometimes the voice of a congregation, especially in the case of Unitarian Universalist congregations, where only you, the people, have the authority to call a minister of your congregation. And one of the things about calls for ministers especially is that we like to ask each other, as soon as we start getting to know each other, we'll say, so how are you called? How did you experience a call to ministry? But the reality of a call to ministry, especially for Unitarian Universalists, is that we all are doing ministry together. We are all called. We all have a call story, something that calls us to a life greater than the ones we've lived, greater in some way, that calls us to leave the world a better place, maybe even calls us to something very much like the covenant we'll say in a few minutes. We'll talk a lot about calling today. May the voice of love and longing speak gently and profoundly in your lives. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and welcome to those of you joining us virtually and those of you present here at All Souls Unitarian Church. I'm Graham Cannon, and I'll be serving as your worship associate for today's service. If you're visiting us this morning, we are glad you are here with us. We welcome you and invite you to bring with you this morning your whole self as you join us in worship. In a few moments, we will open our service with the reading of the covenant and the chalice lighting. These rituals remind us to continually renew our promise to live into our covenant, to put love into action, and to live out the community of love and justice we aim to be. Our topic this morning is on the relationship of congregations and ministers, which follows an announcement by our ministerial search committee. Again, welcome. Let us worship.
We connect in so many different ways, and so some announcements for this morning, and greetings to our folks who are watching on the live stream this morning, or who may be watching the service later. If you are here in person, then hopefully you will see some connection cards. They're purple and they have good questions on them. If you want to hear from us, or if you would like to know more about how to connect with All Souls, you can fill this out, leave it in the offertory basket. And if you're online, there's a link for how to let us know you'd like to know more, or perhaps you'd like to be part of a small group, or like to know more about life and activities at All Souls. Or maybe you want to have coffee with the minister, which the minister would love. So let us know you're around. One specific thing that is happening that I'm excited about, the Unitarian Universalist youth are having a conference, something that Unitarian Universalist youth have been doing for a long time. I did the same in my own Unitarian Universalist youth, was go to cons, as we call them. And I love the title of this con. It's Conservation, C-O-N, all in caps, and then conservation. And indeed, this is a Green Sanctuary congregation, and our youth, like us, take environmental justice very, very seriously. So if you're interested in that, you can ask more about that on these connection cards, or you can talk with our religious educator, Sarah Cannon, or you can talk with Graham Cannon, who's involved with our youth group and this morning's worship associate.
Please join us as Colin Elsmore lights our chalice for us this morning. We will read the covenant that is on the wall behind us. Here, let me show you how it goes. Ta-da. You got it. Well done. Now push this down. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Yep, you're good.
A service like today's is not a common one in the life of congregations. A service which, at this moment, features a special announcement from your ministerial search committee. And I am excited for you and so delighted to welcome members of your search committee to make their announcement at this time in the service.
How do I take this out? Good morning. So, if you've read your emails in the past 48 hours, you know that we had a little internal error this week. Our candidate had prepared a letter and video message to go out to you all after today's service, and it accidentally went out on Friday. Oops. There's an Arabic saying that I love. If you want to make God laugh, make plans. I like to think that we made the divine chuckle this week. But in case there are those of you who haven't read your email in the last couple of days, we are still going to do our reveal. We on the Ministerial Search Committee are thrilled to announce that our ministerial candidate is currently the associate minister at a large UU congregation in the DC metro area called Cedar Lane. The senior minister is Abhi Janamanchi, a Hindu Unitarian Universalist. Last weekend, Cedar Lane celebrated the Hindu festival of Holi, where participants fling colored paint at one another to celebrate spring. We have 2 photos of our candidates from last Sunday's service. The one on the left, don't do it yet, the one on the left is the before photo, and the one on the right is the after photo. So, we are proud and excited to present to you our ministerial candidate, the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. Go ahead. They are photos of our potential new minister. As you already have Reverend Katie's letter and video message, which detail her background, we thought we'd take you on the journey that we've been on with Reverend Katie over the past 3 months. As I mentioned last week, we were told by a member of the UUA transition staff back in early January, before our discernment phase began, that what often happens is a committee falls in love with one candidate, and that candidate falls in love with the congregation. That is exactly what happened to us. We are going to share with you personal anecdotes of moments along our discernment journey where each of us fell in love with Reverend Katie. Jerry is going to kick us off as he was the first to fall for Reverend Katie.
On January 2nd, the ministerial records of candidates that might be interested in coming to All Souls were released to us. Reverend Katie was one of 9 candidates we received and reviewed. I loved her record and volunteered to be the contact person for her. On January 4th, I reached out to her to schedule a Zoom interview with our team. Her response was a wonderful yes, and included the following, and I quote, "I have been extensively researching your congregation since the summer," and continued with a request to learn more about us with a comprehensive list of very discerning questions about All Souls. Before her Zoom meeting interview on January 9th, she had a second round of follow-up questions as she prepared for the interview and wanted to understand all about All Souls. Let the story unfold.
The initial candidate interviews last an hour. The UUA requests that we structure the interviews to allow candidates to ask us questions in the last 15 minutes. Before our interview with Reverend Katie, she sent us our first video message. In it, she told us that in our congregational record, she had picked up on some heartbreak in our community around having taken concrete steps to become multiculturally welcoming, but that she sensed we felt we weren't succeeding in being welcoming to people with marginalized identities. She said she wanted to invite us into these messy conversations around multicultural and multi-generational ministry, whether she was with us for 1 hour in the interview or for the next 20 years as our settled minister. She went on to ask us a few questions that she wondered if we would like to discuss during the 15 minutes of the interview that were her 15 minutes. The first one was, where is the pain and where is the joy in the multicultural work that we had done? That was when we realized that she had emailed us all her logistical questions before the interview, so that during the interview, she could use her 15 minutes to minister to us, to help us grapple with a topic where she sensed we were feeling pain. That first interview was extraordinary, and the next 4 anecdotes are from that short but impactful hour and a quarter. The first one is from Emily Salinas, who couldn't be with us this morning. But Emily wanted to share with you that in our very first interview and in every subsequent meeting, Reverend Katie always asked us if it would be okay for each of us to check in. She checked in with us on a consistent basis every time we met, ministering to us from the get-go and consistently throughout the process. Over to Tom.
Indeed. Reverend Katie asked that we have a quick check-in before each one. It just so happened that on that January 9th call, my wife had come down with COVID. And I mentioned that during the call. But I said, my wife is suffering from COVID right now, so a mild case. Reverend Katie responded and said, is Babette okay? Now, most of you all know Babette, and I know she's got a reputation, but going all the way to D.C. is pretty far. And what we learned is this is a prepared candidate. This is somebody that has been looking at us and really is planned and consistently prepared.
Reverend Katie is a very organized person. During her first video encounter with us, she held up a 2-inch 3-ring binder chock full of papers and said that this was her research on the Indianapolis and All Souls Unitarian Church. And later, during her face-to-face interview with us, a question came up regarding the history of All Souls, to which the committee didn't really have the answer on our fingertips. And she says, well, I'll look it up for you. And she has been at Cedar Lane now for about 6 years. And she said that she still refers to the binder that she put together for Cedar Lane. She's organized.
Finally, in that first interview, the All Souls that Reverend Katie reflected back to us led us to question, are you talking about us? Over those 6 months where she had been researching us, she told us that she had reached out to many colleagues who knew of us. And she said that everything she heard about us was consistent, that everybody talked about our kindness, and that we are folks who always do the right thing. She believes in us and has an expansive view of All Souls that makes all sorts of things feel possible for our future. To have her reflect back to us what she sees, hears, and believes about us is powerful and has changed my personal view of us so much at this point that I now believe she is talking about us. There were about 8 weeks between our first interview with Reverend Katie and her coming to Indy for her pre-candidating weekend. Jenny will tell us what happened in those 8 weeks.
Morning. Reverend Katie sent us regular video messages with readings and poems that might help us with what she thought we were dealing with that week. She started each one. Hello, Annie, Emily, Jenny, Jerry, Tom, and Tom, which I eventually came to realize was our names in alphabetical order. I came to look forward to the messages and often went back and re-listened to the readings. By the time Reverend Katie arrived in person, she felt like an old friend.
On the Saturday morning of her pre-candidate weekend, Emily Salinas and I picked up Reverend Katie and her husband Sean for a tour of the Indianapolis area. It was clear that both already knew a lot about Indy, but were eager to see and learn more. Before the interview that afternoon, our team gave them a tour of the All Souls facility and grounds, and that lasted over an hour, a bit longer than we had planned because they were so engaged and had many questions, positive observations, and ideas. And the story just keeps getting better.
It's hard to describe our 3-hour interview during the pre-candidating weekend. It wasn't an interview so much as a transformative conversation. Reverend Katie created a space safe enough that we shared things with one another that we hadn't in our many months together on the committee. This was also the first time we heard Reverend Katie say that her ministry was, at its center, relationships built on caring. There were tears, there was laughter, there was deep, meaningful conversation. Reverend Katie didn't tell us how she would be our minister. For those 3 hours, she was our minister. There was one question that we had talked about a lot in our committee. How must church change post-COVID? Up until that interview, that question had been theoretical. But for the first time during that 3-hour interview, we heard some practical answers to that question. Not only is Reverend Katie aware that changes need to be made, she has some solutions that she's already tried at her current church and among the coalition of UU churches in the Metro DC area that she's a part of. And they're working. Not only is Reverend Katie deeply relational, she is also tech-savvy and data-driven, and every now and again you'll hear her say, "Stop me if I'm geeking out."
As I was driving Reverend Katie that weekend to a meeting, just the two of us in the car, we were chatting, and we talked about our mostly grown children. I mentioned my half-Japanese children and said my daughter had experienced a few issues, but I was grateful that she was not at risk of being shot in an encounter with the police. I then felt embarrassed. I thought this was an awkward and insensitive comment. Reverend Katie said one of the wisest remarks I've heard about the knotty issue of racism as experienced by different peoples of color, that it is a real thing to be grateful for the privileges we, or my daughter, have, as well as being conscious of what we or they don't. She was wise, non-judgmental, and comforting, and I was both appreciative and impressed. That brings us to the service that Reverend Katie ran at the neutral pulpit the next day.
Reverend Katie had told us that her service on Sunday was aimed at the needs of the congregation in whose pulpit she was preaching. However, after our transformational conversation on Saturday of that weekend, Reverend Katie went back to her hotel room and rewrote her sermon for the next day, still keeping it inspirational for the neutral pulpit congregation, but also making it applicable to us, a balm building on the transformational conversation we had experienced the day before.
The service itself looked effortless. We arrived 30 minutes early and found Reverend Katie completely relaxed and greeting people as they arrived. The sermon was seamless and everything fit together. It was an hour of joy. Tom Seibert can't be here today, so Tom Miller will share his reaction to the service.
Yeah, Tom couldn't be here today. But one thing that struck Tom during the process was that you rarely hear about anyone talking about the good news of Unitarian Universalism. And what he noticed, or how struck he was, I should say, was how Reverend Katie displayed enthusiasm and excitement sharing the good news of Unitarian Universalism from the pulpit on that Sunday.
I hadn't seen Tom Seibert giddy before that. So those are the highlights of the story of how the Ministerial Search Committee fell in love with Reverend Katie. We believe that she is not just a strong candidate, but an exceptional one. We believe that her ministry could not just be a solid one, but a transformational one for us here at All Souls. So what happens next? The third and final phase of the search process is about you. You now get to start your journey with Reverend Katie. And, as always, Reverend Katie has a plan. In her letter is a link to a Google form for you to post questions. Then Reverend Katie will send regular video messages addressing some of those congregational questions that were put on the Google form. So please, if you have something burning that you would just love to know and you don't want to wait until May, please, please send her a question on the Google form. You can also sign up for the Zoom meeting on April 24th. So she's going to do a Zoom meeting on April 24th. There is a link to sign up to that Zoom meeting on her letter. So again, if you would like to meet her before she comes in person, please sign up for April 24th. Candidating week is the second week of May. It is our goal to give each of you the opportunity to meet Reverend Katie in person. May 8th, she will be here in the pulpit. It is Mother's Day. We are so sorry. We have time restrictions. So the first Sunday is Mother's Day. If there's any way you can postpone your Mother's Day plans until after church, please come to church and meet Reverend Katie then. She is here the whole of the following week. So she's here for the whole week from May 8th to May 15th, bookended by being in the pulpit. The following week, there will be many meetings of different subgroups within the church with Reverend Katie. The Ministerial Search Committee will be reaching out to people, not this coming week, but the week after, with invitations to those meetings for different subgroups to meet with Katie during that week, candidating week. We will also have at least 2 cottage meetings, one in person, one on Zoom, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. We will send out information about cottage meetings. Everybody and anybody is welcome. We will have a congregational pitch-in early Saturday afternoon, May the 14th, for a social event for everybody to be able to come and meet Reverend Katie and her husband, Sean. And then on May 15th, Reverend Katie will again be in the pulpit, and after that service will be the congregational meeting where we vote whether or not to call her as our next settled minister. If you have any questions about anything you've heard today, if over the next 4 weeks between now and candidating week you have any questions about candidating week, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us on the Ministerial Search Committee for help. Thank you so much.
I'm feeling so much love for the search committee because it's just even more clear when you share what an enormous commitment it was on your part to perform this act of service for our congregation. Thank you all so much, those of you who are here and those who are away. So exciting. Oh my gosh. So I have a story to tell you. Can everybody on the quilt see me okay? Everybody in the pews? Good. Great. So, once upon a time, there was a girl on her way to her first day at a new school. If that has ever been you, give me a sign. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. I've been the new kid on the first day at school a lot. We moved a lot when I was a kid. And I see that, some of you might know what that involves. So maybe you had something with you that smelled new and felt new, like maybe a new backpack or a new pair of shoes, or maybe you were wearing something that was kind of big that had been handed down to you by someone older, something with room to grow into. And maybe you had some questions, like maybe, what if I get lost in this new building? Or will the teacher be nice? Or will the other kids like me? Or will I know anyone else in the class? And maybe you had other questions like, what if someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer? Or what if I make a mistake? Will they be kind? Will they be understanding? Or even questions like, can I do this? Am I ready? But this girl was pretty brave and she did not get lost much. And by the end of the day, a lot of her questions had been answered, and most of them even had good answers. But even a day that goes pretty well can be tiring when so many things are new. So by dinner time, she did not want to experience one more new thing. So she was very happy when her family made her favorite dinner, which might have been macaroni and cheese, or might have been a stir fry, or might even have been stuffed cabbage. She thought, I will be so glad to go to church on Sunday because everybody there already knows me, and it will be just like it always is. But this was not exactly true. You see, once upon a time, there was a minister, and it was that minister's first day at a new church. And maybe she had moved to a new town in order to go to that new church. Maybe she had moved into a new home. Maybe she had to find a new grocery store and new bookstores that she liked and new restaurants that she liked. And maybe the weather was a little bit different too. Maybe spring was kind of holding out on that place a little bit in a way that local residents found annoying. And maybe she had a lot of questions like, what if I can't find the supplies I need? Or what if their library doesn't have the books that I am used to using? Or What if I don't like my office? Questions like, what if someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer? Or what if I make a mistake? Will people be understanding? Will they be kind? Or even questions like, can I do this? Am I ready? When the girl came to church with her family, the new minister was right there at the front door greeting people. The first week of school had been so busy that the girl had honestly forgotten about this whole new minister situation. Are you kidding me? She thought. Things are different here too. I can't even. The new minister thought, oh, a kid. I like kids. And oh my gosh, those look like new shoes. They're so cool. Good morning, she said to the girl. I love your rainbow sneakers. Well, the only thing worse than having a new minister was having to talk to one. So the girl put herself firmly behind her grown-ups. Now, this was the minister's first day at a new church, but this was not her first day on planet Earth, so she got it. If she had a grown-up's legs to hide behind that morning, she probably would have used that resource. Well, it's nice to meet you, she said. I'm so glad you're here. And she turned to greet the next person coming in. The girl started to walk away, relieved that she had escaped the whole talking to a new person thing, but then it hit her. Maybe the minister was new, but being glad the girl was here was not new, not at this church. It was universalism at work. It was the UU practice of honoring the special, sacred goodness in the heart of each person. That was every UU's job. So she turned around. Hey, she said, really loud so she could get the new minister's attention, of course. The minister looked over. I'm glad you're here too, said the girl, and held up her 2 U's like she did during the chalice lighting and spirit play every week. The new minister did it back. The girl pointed to her rainbow sneakers. Target, she whispered really loudly. And the new minister gave her a thumbs up. After experiencing her own first day of school, it felt pretty powerful to be able to make a grown-up minister feel welcome like that. And honestly, as welcomes went, it might have been the best one the new minister got all day. Thank you.
Churches that I've had to go to. I've had many UU congregations in many different states with many different ministers. I've also worked as a Unitarian Universalist on the regional level, and I recently started working on the national level as well. I've seen the good and I've seen the bad. I've seen ministers I connected with, and I've seen some I didn't. I have worked with communities that work together and accept each other. I've also worked in communities where people haven't really figured out how to be symbiotic yet. As a welcoming and opening community, we need to be able to grow and to work together, and we need to be able to accept people when they come in. We need to welcome people who need us because we probably need them. Not all congregations have really learned that yet. My first church was a small UU church in Utica, New York. It was a very small community, and I was very young, but one thing I remember is that I never felt unwelcome or unwanted. I always got a warm greeting at the door. The youth were all nice to me, and so were the adults, and the congregation as a whole was welcoming and wonderful. When I got a bit older, I moved to a much bigger church, where I didn't know anyone. On the first Sunday we were there, I was so excited. I was curious to see the service, to hear the music, but I was most excited for RE. When I stepped into the classroom, I got strange looks, and I heard hurtful comments and comments under their breath from the other kids. After RE and service, I went to coffee hour at the small church in New York, and the small church in New York, everyone, including the kids, would help with coffee hour. So when I walked into the new church with me and my family, we figured we should try to help. When me and my older siblings walked in, we got yelled at. Nobody was even allowed near the kitchen at this church, especially not kids. We weren't allowed to help, no matter how much we knew or how much we had to offer. This was not a welcoming congregation. No one in the church worked together. The DRE didn't talk to the volunteers ahead of time. The minister didn't have worship associates or a worship team to back them up and to work with them. And the adults and youth didn't even talk to each other. All the churches and communities I've been a part of have all had issues. The biggest and most common is that sometimes it's hard for the different communities and cliques in the church to contact each other and to talk and keep a good bond and conversation going. We don't listen very well. Being a welcoming congregation doesn't mean we just need to open our doors. It means we need to open our ears, our minds, and our hearts. When someone walks in through those doors, like a new minister, we need to work with them, and we need to listen to their story. The best congregations and the best communities I've been a part of and worked with are ones where everyone works in unison. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. Helen Keller. Thank you.
Sometimes our call to ministry comes in the lives and experiences of others and who we are in community with. And so to give voice to this experience itself, we have this time of joys and sorrows. And this morning we have a number of joys and sorrows. I have to tell you that it's a joy this morning that the heat's on. I heard last week was really cold. Yeah, okay, it was. So the joy is the heat's on. The sorrow is the boilers are about to die and we have to get new ones. Just so you know, that's why. You've already started the process. It's a joy that we're working on it together. I want this thing done before Reverend Katie gets here. A joy and a sorrow in our hearts this morning. Elizabeth Drucker, who is on the mend from some surgery. May she be up and about and running around soon. A joy for Natalie Solmer, who has an art show that's described here in the order of service. Joys and love to Jane Alexander, who continues to be on the mend from a return of breast cancer. And in the larger world around us, and actually for some of our very own members, sorrows and love for those of us who are transgender folks. There are hundreds of laws introduced or being passed in the 50 states in some of the 50 states right now, questioning the right of transgender people to even exist. Joy and love to our Muslim neighbors. This is the second week of Ramadan. And joy and love to our Christian neighbors and those of us here who might be Christian or Muslim for that matter. This is a especially holy week, not only Ramadan, but Easter, or for those of us who are Jewish or neighbors who are Jewish, Passover starts on Saturday. There's so much spirit in the world at this time. A sorrow for the woman who went to the hospital for care after trying to abort her own pregnancy and was turned into the state of Texas, the police. She committed no crime, but she's being treated as if she had. And such a joy. What an you guys are wonderful. Thank you for all of your work, our search committee. Spirit of life. The call to ministry comes in so many different ways. A hand reached out in greeting by someone we are only just now meeting. Or perhaps the hand of a child as we cross the street together. Perhaps the hand of a friend as we're cooking for a church potluck. Or the hand of a fellow church member as we visit them in the hospital. the voice of a friend calling on a phone. The voice of a prisoner in a letter as we write to them, even though we've never met them. Perhaps the voice of something disturbing, gentle, surprising, that comes from within. May all of the callings that come in joys and sorrows and in our loving and our caring connect us deeply to ourselves, to each other, and to all that is holy. Amen. So be it. Blessed be.
Our offertory contributions will go to our very own East Coast Migrant Head Start project and the Indianapolis campus. Your contributions today will support the Head Start project to provide the supplies and educational toys that will help the children receive a high-quality education to support school readiness. The children of migrant and seasonal farm workers are cared for and advocated for in a culturally sensitive way, and so are their parents, who matter the most to these children. To contribute, you can put cash or a check into the collection plate, or if you're online, you can go to allsoulsindy.org, where you will find a link that says Give to All Souls here. It's on the left side, beneath the description for today's service. Be sure to mention your donation is for the Head Start program. Thank you for your generosity in supporting the mission of All Souls and for your continued love for one another and for this world. May we now accept our morning offering.
So in a momentous time like this, and so much excitement as you're about to meet your ministerial candidate, Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. As an interim minister who has served 10 different Unitarian Universalist congregations and closing in on 32 years of experiencing ministry and talking with colleagues about ministry, I have some thoughts about things you can do, should you call Reverend Katie, to help your ministry together be successful. 8 thoughts of advice. And before I give you those thoughts of advice, there's an article here that I got, actually after the title of the service went out. It's a clipping that was sent in by the family of a member who died some years ago. And it's a clipping from the Indianapolis Star magazine, and it's an article about the Reverend Jack Mendelsohn, who was the minister here from 1952 to 56, 51 to 56, yes. And when he left here, he went on to serve 2 other congregations. He was a very prominent figure, not only in Unitarian Universalism, but really in United States culture in the 60s and 70s. And I love hearing some of the stories about his time here with you. One of the key things, though, for this morning is this quote, one that I have shared with every interim congregation I have served. Reverend Jack Mendelsohn wrote, "Great congregations and great ministers create one another." And that is indeed my experience. And knowing you and having met Reverend Katie, you could do great things together if you chose. If you do choose, my first piece of these 8 pieces of advice. You know, ministers have a front row seat on life. And as a matter of fact, the article talks a lot about that experience of being right there, right in the immediacy of life. Ministers get invited. You invite ministers into your lives at times of great joy, sometimes times of great sorrow. Sometimes there's a lot that goes on in a minister's life. I had more than one Sunday that looked like this: 2 worship services, followed by a memorial service, and then a visit to a hospital to help a family celebrate a newborn child, and then another visit to the hospital to speak with a member who's just learned about a tough diagnosis. Ministry is not really a career, it's not really a lifestyle, it's a calling, and one always on our mind. So one of the things about that, and this is the piece of advice, when you see your minister at the grocery store, they're still at work. We're very glad to see you. We're always glad to see you. We love you. I love you. And if there seems like there's a lot going on, it's because there's always a lot going on for us. And the minute we see you and are thinking about how are you doing? How are you doing given the last thing we talked about? Or, oh yeah, there was that piece of business that we're working on. You know, we're working on the boiler together, something like that. There's always an aspect of our lives at which we are at work. Second piece of advice. I have to tell you how grateful I am. I have gotten to be your interim minister. And by the way, I'm your interim minister for some months yet, so it's not time to say goodbye. You are so respectful and supportive of your ministers. You entrust your ministers with powerful expectations. And that allows you to do great things together. And yet it is complex to be a minister and it's hard to explain, so let me describe what happens typically. We'll go to a party. We decide we want a little downtime. We want a little more distance than usual from ministry. And so we've gone to a party. A friend's invited us to a party, and there probably won't be any Unitarian Universalists there. And then somebody will ask, so what do you do? And that's the moment at which the minister becomes the party buzzkill. As one colleague describes it, she described it in a UU World article, there might have been some outrageous conversation, and everything goes like at that moment when you pull the needle off the old vinyl record or the car screeches to the halt. Everybody was, what word did I just say? Oh, I dropped the F-bomb. Oh my God, I talked about. Then their apologies start coming out. Oh, I'm so sorry, pastor or minister or reverend. And then comes attempts at deep, meaningful talks. Just the kind of talk you were hoping not to have while you went to the party. And now I'm not telling you this actually because this is your problem. It's not. Ministers train to understand the complexities of what we do. It's the minister's job to keep a healthy boundary between their personal life and their calling as your minister. Your minister should always be your minister in the same way that your doctor is always your doctor, or your therapist is always your therapist. But what you can do, and this is my piece of advice, make sure your minister takes their day off, that they use their vacation time, give them a sabbatical every 4, 5, 6 years or so. Give your time, minister time to have spiritual community with other ministers. It's really restorative. These things are so restorative to the life of a minister and help us to be present as ministers to you and the life of your congregation. Number 3, your relationship with your minister, whoever that minister is going to be the most complex human relationship you may ever have. Because your minister has many roles with you. So at the moment, I'm in the role of a kind of teacher, spiritual teacher. But just a couple of weeks ago, I was also a fundraiser, telling you how excited I am for your a year ahead and asking you to pledge to your congregation. And by the way, just as a side note, the pledge campaign's going really, really well. And I have to tell you, you guys are great. You're so generous, so loyal to your congregation. Almost there. So I haven't gotten that pledge in. Just a few left to go. I'm grateful and I admire you for your generosity and your loyalty. So, your minister is a fundraiser, a teacher, pastor, visiting you in hospitals, supporting you through complicated spiritual journeys. Your minister is a volunteer supporter, guiding you, encouraging you, sometimes correcting you. Your minister is there during times of important transition, marriages, memorials, weddings. We have so many different kinds of roles with you in our relationships with you. More roles than perhaps exist in any other kind of relationship. So the advice here is, it is complicated, and there'll be all kinds of feelings that happen that you'll have in your relationship with your minister, whoever that minister is. Stay connected with your minister, because you're going to have moments like this, that moment where you catch up with your minister at the grocery store and suddenly find yourself sharing some really deep, important feelings, some spiritual experience you've had, and are really grateful to them, and then find yourself at the board meeting that night in which the minister disagrees with you publicly and you're really irritated with your minister. And that's real life, every year for a minister at least. 4th piece of advice. Ministers are clergy, spiritual leaders of really any faith. We are called to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. So if we're doing our job, we'll comfort you when things are rough or difficult or even joyful, yes, supportive, but there will also be times that we irk you or make you really mad. You can expect your minister to do both. And tell them when you feel that the balance between those two doesn't feel right. So you should know this. Ministers, we tend to know, clergy, in fact, in any religious community, we tend to know we're finding the right balance between comforting afflictions and afflicting comforts when we hear an equal number of complaints that we're doing it wrong or we're doing it right, or we need to do more, we need to do less. If we're somehow in the middle there, we're probably balancing it right. Which, and here's the piece of advice, when you don't feel the balance is right, is really afflicting. We do our best to stay together, stick together, and understand that it's good to have discomfort in congregational life. It means what we're doing really matters. We're growing, we're changing. Fifth piece of advice. Please talk to us, please. Don't talk around us. Don't just go talk to a friend and then just leave it there. Please talk to us, especially when you're unhappy with us, especially when you're really feeling joyful. When you're feeling something intensely or deeply, talk to us. About 5 years ago, knowing that I give a sermon like this to every congregation, although I always change it because I learn a lot from every congregation. But 4 or 5 years ago, I polled all my colleagues, Unitarian Universalist colleagues, and I said, so I give this kind of sermon in the spring, the last spring of my interim ministry. What would you like me to say in the sermon? All of them, without exception, all of them said, please talk to us. Gossip, anonymous griping, please don't do that. Just talk to us. If you want to demoralize your minister, don't talk to us. I'm going to offer more on that actually in a couple of weeks, because there's easy ways to do that and some easy guides to that. Sixth piece of advice, be tender to one another. We all make mistakes. We're all growing. All of us at one time or another walked through those front doors to the church for the very first time. And unless we were very in the arms of someone as a child, it's a really intense experience. Be tender. Love one another. Seventh piece of advice, practice shared ministry. I found it doesn't matter how large or small the congregation is, a congregation that has a minister can't expect the minister to do it all. You have to do it together. That doesn't mean you do everything identically the same. In shared ministry, it turns out some things are best done by a minister, like managing staff, overseeing worship in general, keeping current on best practices, encouraging us to have healthy conflict and avoid unhealthy conflict. And you, in turn, you, the people of the congregation, it is your privilege and your responsibility to articulate the purpose of All Souls, to come up with the words of your mission and vision, and to call those people who become your ministers, and only you can do that. And then when you have done that, give them the resources they need so that they can manage this institution well and support you in your ministries. And lastly, your ministers cannot do your ministries. It's not enough not even enough to write the check. Be connected to your own calling. If you want a spiritual life, show up for it. If you want the world to be a better place, which our spiritual lives usually call us to, you have to show up for that. Show up for the difficult tasks. And I know I've said this before, but you have saved lives here at All Souls by being together, by nurturing this congregation. I know this. I've heard it from some of you. Don't be bystanders. You make a huge difference by being All Souls and being in this community, being in this world. Please show up for your ministries. You're saving lives. You have another century of great ministry ahead. You've had over a century of ministry since 1903 together. You have another century, at least, of great ministry. And the possibility, perhaps, that you're going to be calling your next minister soon. I offered you these thoughts of advice as a way to keep being a great congregation and to keep calling great ministers. We have a song I'd like to sing a song as we close, a hymn. It's number 298. We're going to sing the first, the fourth, and the fifth verses. Wake now my vision. I hope you'll find it in these gray books. 298. Verse 4. Wake now my conscience with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a plan of transformed by our care. Please be seated. Go now with the voice of love ringing through the living of your lives. Know that you matter. Know that you are loved. And when you can't quite hear the call or can't quite feel that love, know that we will be here every week, every day. Go in peace, be in peace, and know that we are and we will be loved.
for those of you tuning in online, please remember that Ollie Howe is hosting the online coffee hour on Zoom, and the link is in your welcome email from this morning.